Welcome to this session entitled 20th Century Strategy, More Women is Good for Business. We have a wonderful opportunity to discuss as part of a collaboration with Arizona State University and Women Political Leaders, for which we're very happy to announce that this partnership is happening, and we have a wonderful, stellar alignment of speakers joining the session, in which we will discuss how to make this new normal that we all talk about. One, leadership is no longer the exception. So, equal access to opportunities for women and men, that's just equals good economics. It's really super simple. Christine Lagarde, she often says that including women in the workforce, that would be like adding another China plus another India to global growth. So it seems like a no-brainer in a way. So what are we waiting for? And what strategies are lacking to do what seems to be so obviously and evidently the right thing to do? Now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody tried to mitigate the damage that happened to business, to societies. And there seems to still be one solution missing in the arsenal that everybody talks about, meaning how do we actually use this crisis, this difficult situation, to make something good out of it in terms of improving the equality between women and men in the workplace. At WPL, Women Political Leaders, we produce annually together with Kantar the Reykjavik Index for Leadership. And this index measures how suitable women and men are viewed for leadership positions across 22 sectors. And we can see that perception continues to play a really big role in defining what people think women or men should do when they occupy the workplace. What expectations are they met with? And I can tell you, we're definitely not there yet. Prejudices and stereotypes still prevail. In a really large report done by the International Labour Organization, ILO, which is called Women in Business and Management, there were companies surveyed, and this was with a very clear result, meaning that those that have a track record of gender diversity in the management, 74% cited profit increases between 5 and 20%. Again, also on a business level, it seems to be so obvious. More women means better business. So in this high-level panel discussion, where we will have the voices of leading women from business and leading women from politics, we want to hear how can we actually address this? How can we critically examine the strategies, and how can we really evolve business so that the challenges of the century are met? There is this obvious connection, the proven connection between more women in business and improved outcomes. And we want to use this as the baseline for the conversation. And now we're really excited, I'm really excited to hear what these fantastic panelists will have to say. Let me start with a question to Anne Cairns. Anne is the Executive Vice Chair, President of MasterCard. She also is the Global Chair of the 30% Club, which is an organization that aims for 30% or more women in leadership positions. And Anne has a really vast experience of business insights. And I'd like to ask you, Anne. So in the Harvard Business Review, there was an internal report from Hewlett-Packard quoted, and that said that men feel confident applying for a job if they meet 60% of the application criteria, whereas women often are more hesitant and they wait until they meet almost 100% of the criteria. Looking at the Reykjavik Index and the perception and stereotypes that women and men are still confronted with, I wonder, could you share your thoughts on what perceptions might lead to this gap between women and men when they apply for a job or don't apply for a job. And what can you as a business leader do inside your company to change the processes of application to close this gap? Anne, over to you.
Thanks, Silvana, and it's wonderful to be with you here today. And I'm sorry that we'll not be meeting in Iceland this year, which is always a great conference that you organise, but I'm sure we'll have a wonderful virtual one instead. In respect of the question that you've raised, it's a very interesting one because many people think, oh, the woman hasn't applied for the job, confident enough. Actually, research has shown that's just not the case. The main reason for women not applying for roles in the business world is because they don't think they'll be offered the job. That's a very, very different situation. And I do think that we need a cultural change inside. And that cultural change has to be one of inclusion, as you've mentioned. And so businesses have to really take having balanced slates very seriously, having gender neutral job specifications, having blind interviews even, so that you can't you're not sort of basing it on the name of the person on at the top of the piece of paper. You're just looking at the best qualified person for the role. Now, the thing about patients and so on, as you mentioned, is women like to have as much as they possibly can. And I think the thing about that really is that, yes, as girls, we're socialized to kind of want to follow the rules. So if a job spec says, you need these 10 things, we're thinking about that and we're saying, have I got 8? Have I got 9 things? Now, I do think that's a situation not of lack of confidence, but of women being encouraged perhaps to say, take a bit more risk in that respect, and actually remember that often you get through networking with people, not applying blind. So actually go and talk to the person who's advertised the role and get a bit more feel about what they're looking for. And maybe you'll be able to convince them that they're actually looking for you when they didn't know they were. So I just think this is the kind of thing that women should do. And it's also the company should give them the ability to do it.
And can I ask you, have you been able to already successfully apply that in MasterCard? Or because, I mean, the sector that you're working in is one that is known for having quite challenges to get women to come to those jobs and feel that this is the environment that they could be thriving in. And just kind of short housekeeping, everybody who's not speaking, just don't forget to put your mute yourself. Okay, thanks.
We've made great strides in MasterCard, but yet. We don't have balanced slates for every job, although we've said that that's actually what we want. And we actually track exactly where we are in that respect. One of the things that we've been doing lately is we've been looking at the number of women that we have in the mid-levels and saying, why are these women not progressing as quickly as the men? Let's look at all of the factors to do with that, including their promotion, the jobs that they go after, whether they choose to stay or leave the company, why they've left the company. It's often at the first rung of management that we see a sort of fall in the numbers of women in companies. McKinsey pointed that out. They've said it's the first rung of the ladder. And I think it's very important for every company to look inside themselves and say, how can I address that? Inside MasterCard, we recently rolled out a program across the company where we've got 800 people involved, actually addressing mentorship for exactly that. And it's women mentoring women right now, saying, how do you make the next move up the ladder? I think these are the kind of things that will make a difference in the future. The last thing I'd say is that the other thing we've done to create a level playing field is actually have 4 months paid maternity and paternity leave everywhere in the world. And remember, we're in over 100 countries. I love that, because you're not looking at a young woman and going to have a baby, and you're not looking at a young man and thinking the same. You're just thinking they're going to be parents. You're actually thinking about it in the same way. That helps the women, and it gives a great message to the men that, you know, caring for your children is a good thing and the companies support it.
Well, thanks, Anne. And that's definitely an ambitious and great program. Reminds me of Iceland, because you mentioned the conference in Iceland before, where everybody says, no matter which spectrum of politics, that introducing the same amount of month as parental leave for fathers and for mothers was a game changer, not only for the parents in terms of relation to their babies, but also for employers looking at men and women the same way, as being potentially out for a couple of months after having a baby. This brings me to politics, and the next question I would love to ask Rania Al-Mashad, who is one of the few really outstanding leading women in Egypt. She's the Minister of International Cooperation. She was Minister of Tourism, which we know is a hugely important sector for the Egyptian economy. And Rania, I'd like to ask you more of a kind of a macroeconomic, so to say, question, meaning that, you know, all those international organizations like OECD or World Bank, IMF, they recommend that economic growth needs to include women, that women in the workforce, in the kind of official workforce, would be a game changer, and that they should be participating in the same way, earn money the same way that men do. And the data available shows that there is still a huge disproportion in the participation of women and men, specifically in the countries of the Arab world. So with your experience in Egypt, what answers do you see? So which avenues could one take to change that?
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to join all of you in this panel for a very important topic that I'm very passionate about. You mentioned in your opening remarks, Christine Lagarde, and here I want to, I used to work at the IMF during her time, and one of the very important topics that she endorsed in the IMF, which is the biggest financial institution, is work on gender. How do economies benefit by having more women on the labor force? And the term that was used is that women's participation is macro critical. If you take a look at women joining the labor force, it means that GDP grows, productivity increases, and therefore the incomes of men go up as well, because productivity in general grows. What is very important and different today about international institutions when they are talking about gender issues is that it is not just looking at the
Rania, I think we can't hear you. Or is it just me? Unfortunately, in the middle of this very energetic statement, it seemed the connection broke down. Yeah, so Rania is probably joining us again from a better connection. Maybe we take Juliana in the meantime and then ask Rania to join and continue her answer. Because if that's okay, then Juliana, I would like to ask you, as a partner of Freshfields Broadcast Deringer, you're kind of on the global level with responsibilities, and you also are representing, in terms of diversity, your company, Freshfields, as one of the world's leading law firms. In Freshfields, many statements, not only Freshfields, also your competitors, if I can say so, it's stated very obviously that as a firm you believe in the benefit of diversity, but like many other companies, And this extends from law firms to international consultancies to the financial sector to digital companies. It's a tough time to have women come to leadership and to keep them in leadership. So my question to you, because Freshfields also is, of course, a business service organization providing legal services. So your success depends on how happy your clients are. So if your clients would say, listen, I give you the job if you make sure that a certain percentage of women are working on these specific files, what would happen?
Yeah, thank you, Silvana. Well, actually, that's a very good idea. My male partners might not think so, but kind of if we want to advance equality in leadership, I guess indeed we need to all work together, and that's kind of why we're here on this panel. So Freshfields, we do of course kind of have our targets and want to increase the number of women in our partnership. We're not yet there, so we have an aspirational target of 30%, and we are partners in the 30% club as well. But still, we are struggling, and the reason, kind of our internal studies, if you so want, show that the reason why we struggle is that kind of on the lower level with lawyers we have like 50-50, so 50% are women, but kind of then progressing in their career, for some reason, we kind of lose them on the way up. And on the partnership level, we now have, I think, like 20% or so. Why is that the case? And well, if I would know the answer, we all would not be sitting here, but doing something else. I guess, indeed, it is, there are many elements to it, and some of them have been mentioned. And one decisive element certainly is perception, stereotypes, and all of that, and that it does need some resilience and courage to just stay and carry on despite of kind of expectations others might have. But there's only so much you can do as an organization. So you can try to have an inclusive culture. You can try to, in the interview process, as you mentioned, and you can try to kind of be as neutral as possible and all of that. But I firmly believe kind of the more pressure you have from outside, so to say, that this does help indeed. So be it customers, if you kind of sell a product, if customers don't buy your product for whatever reason, you will kind of have to make up your mind and come up with something else. If as a professional service company like us, we do what our clients want us to do. So if you want us to be more diverse, then even if we would not believe in it, and we do believe in it, so just to reassure you, even if we would not, we would just do it, just because our clients ask for it. And I guess kind of together there, we really kind of can move a huge step forward if we are more kind of challenging to the outside world, so to say, to the people we deal with this, and just constantly kind of get on their nerves and try to improve equality.
Isn't it a bit of a chicken and egg situation? Because different kind of product, different everything, but somebody from the leadership of Unilever just said in another webinar in this UN General Assembly week that it's that believing in something doesn't make people buy it. That maybe 10% of the decisions on where to spend your money is steered by belief. So this one is better, kind of diversity, but this one is cheaper, and you think, well, they might give me the same kind of quality for less of a price. And okay, well, we don't have the diversity bonus, but we really just want to win this case. So where does it kind of, how do you make this a competitive offer?
I think it's various elements, kind of, as always. So one is intrinsic for sure. So I think as an organization, and we as Freshfields, really, we do believe in diversity, and we do believe that kind of a diverse leadership is a better leadership team. So one is intrinsic. So if you don't really believe, people kind of people will recognize that. But the other element is kind of everything around you. So kind of your customers, your clients. So the more they kind of challenge you and the more they want you to move in a certain direction. And they more kind of, they threaten that otherwise there's someone else who might be better on this front they might turn to. The more you then try to basically just, well, fulfill their expectations.
Julian, I see Amy and Anne are attentively listening, so who knows, Freshfields might get new clients for a mixed legal service provider team. So watch out for that. Rania, we're so happy you're back, and I hope the internet connection stays stable, because we really were already so excited by your energetic beginning of what you were to say. So maybe if you can just pick up where you left.
Yeah.
Continue.
I hope it wasn't a man trying to cut the internet, but anyway, what I was trying to say is that many international institutions today take this topic not as a topic of a minority or a vulnerable group, but more as in economic setting. And that makes a huge difference when it comes to policy discussions, design, governments partnering to change legislation which might affect active participation of women, making sure that there is access to education and training in certain places. So the role that international institutions play by putting the focus more, shifting it from just a simple gender issue into an economic important issue is something which definitely helps governments push forward the agenda once there is political will. And then secondly, today and post-COVID, all of us know that a government cannot do everything on its own. Private sector cannot do everything on its own. So here, you know, being during the week of the UN and the buzzword of stakeholder capitalism and everyone coming together to create positive collaboration platforms is extremely telling and important for the gender agenda. In our case, with the World Economic Forum, we are the first country in Africa and the Middle East to actually launch Closing the Gender Gap Accelerator. And the purpose of this accelerator is to have the private sector with us, with the government, and having international standards to basically create more engagement for women in the labor force and make sure that we have more leadership roles. So the other thing which is very, very important is when there is political will, there is a bet and risk-taking on women. In my case, I was the first female to be a minister of tourism, and this is a male-dominated sector. And in my close to 2 years mandate, I was able to achieve the highest revenues in Egypt's history in tourism. So this creates internally a change in perception, not by saying something, but actually a tangible outcome. And these are all very, very important steps that leadership has to take, betting on more women. Now I'm in international cooperation. My whole senior staff are females. And it's, again, doing something different, setting the example, showing that this gender difference is one that we should not be necessarily taking into account in hiring. It's really the competency that needs to come to the forefront. So I believe that creating positive examples, keeping the message, an economic message, not just a vulnerable group, even though, and I'm not belittling this, because post-COVID, women are one of the or the most affected because of many, many reasons related to schooling at home and the unemployment in general. But we can revive, again, this movement towards gender parity and more women in leadership if we keep on pushing the economic positive outcome and spillover for both men and women.
Thank you, Rania. This was very, very enlightening. I think also the importance of role models, the one that you set yourself, but also then bringing more women into your immediate work area and making sure that there's plenty of other women, so that it's not always a first, and then, because sometimes it's even more important or more difficult to be the second or the third. That's been also stated by those who have been first, say, making sure there is a second, that I'm not towards, we're kind of back to the old ways of doing things like we did before. So thanks Rania, and thanks. Hopefully the connection stays and we can have another round of discussion with you participating in this. So let me ask now Maris Lauri from a very different part of the world, also a politician. So Maris is from Estonia, Estonia, as sometimes the Estonians like to say. You're a member of parliament, you're deputy chair of the finance committee. You were the Minister of Finance and Minister of Education and Research, and you're our Women Political Leaders Ambassador in Estonia. Very thrilled to have you here. It would be, of course, absolutely, impossible to not discuss the 21st century business without mentioning 21st century technology, in which Estonia as a country is taking the global leadership role. And at it from the perspective that we're discussing here today, in which way did the technology in workplace, both before but also during COVID-19, affect the equality between women and men? And how did it affect, for example, daily work environments? And what about using the technology to help improve the equality in workplace? Maris.
Yeah. Hello. I'm glad to join this interesting discussion. Several thoughts that are so similar here also in Estonia. I really believe that in every bad thing is something good as well. And if you look on this current COVID crisis, then one thing we probably learned is that it is not important how many hours you are working, but it is important what the working result is. So there is no need to be in office 6 hours or 8 hours or 9 hours or 10 hours. It is important that you have done your job. So I hope that this understanding that it is possible to work remotely, it is possible to work from home, will stay even if we have come out from this crisis. This is one thing we have seen already, and yes, the crisis have been had very strong burden on women, but this also had put to issues which should be solved and which are very important for a woman. For example, how the working load between inside the family is arranged between husband and wife, how to organize and how to work with the children, especially during the crisis when there was schooling. How to, for example, guarantee that the technology which we are using is understandable and user-friendly. I think if you look on most of the women, the understanding generally about the IT technology is a bit weaker among women than among the men. And there is also, of course, a very strong perception that males are better in IT. I don't believe in this. But anyway, we have to understand that, and we have seen that women are very fast to learn how to use this technology. But in the future, we would have to have better technology and understanding, and it should start already from the school, which is also difficult because if we are looking how many women are learning IT technology, for example, not very much, unfortunately. So probably we would have some kind of special programs starting from the base school to encourage women to learn technology, not only computers, but overall technology, because we all use technology. not depending on who we are. So technology should take account that we are different people in a way, and different understandings. I believe that this is one lesson we have learned about this one. And of course, this remote working also puts on the importance how to make the working environment at home, for example, if you are working at home, sort of person-friendly. So it's healthy. How to organize this one, the working, not working 10 hours constantly, but to go out to walk outside. This is also a question I think we should discuss in different areas as well. This, I would say about the technology, I think this is the first thing which are coming in my mind if I'm thinking this on this spring and this summer. So, thank you.
Thank you, Maris, and thank you for sharing the kind of very inclusive approach to new technology and how it should be affordable, available, and understandable for just everybody to use in all kinds of job environments and educational environments. So I think that's to one of the world's leading tech companies, Salesforce, and Amy Weaver, who is here, who is the president and legal and corporate affairs, and she is in the board of Salesforce. And Salesforce is seen by many as very much kind of leading the way in terms of practicing the diversity in the workplace, and also showing that it requires more than just, which is difficult enough, aligning human resource policies, but also about ensuring an inclusive and respectful culture in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So at Salesforce, I've been always impressed by the numbers, the figures that you mentioned. I forget them straight away, but I know that that they're quite high. You already put the money where you what you talk about and make an investment in this. So maybe you can give us some insights about what is needed to create a work culture, to have an inclusive environment in a tech company for women, for minorities, and what are the benefits? Then when you make this kind of calculation within Salesforce, why do you say, yes, we pay for this, we make this investment?
So thanks, Silvana. It's wonderful to be here this morning with this incredible panel of amazing women. When we talk about policies for women, I would group them into two different areas. And there's those that I might call like on the surface, and those are kind of beneath the surface. And those on the surface are maternity leave, gender pay. And Salesforce in particular has done amazing things in both areas. 6 months paid leave for men and women. We were really on the cutting edge of leaning into gender pay equality with doing surveys and committing to doing these surveys annually. We've paid out more than $10 million over the last 4 years to make sure that our salaries are reflective and they're fair. But when I look forward at what we really need to grapple with as a society, it's the issues that are below the surface. Because I don't think bringing women into the C-suite, into the board, into political office, and then if you can't hear them or you expect them to act exactly the same way, that's not diversity. And two of the areas I would point to, last January in Davos, I was at a dinner with about 40 just amazing women. And these were women really at the top of their career. But every single one of them commented at some point during the evening how hard it was to get their voice heard in a meeting where they were usually the only woman or one of only a few. And again, if your voice can't be heard because either you're not interrupting or someone's interrupting you, or you can't get a word in edgewise when everyone's talking, you're not able to bring all of the gifts and all the talents you have to the company. And we have got to be looking out for that. We have to look out for one another, and we have to do a better job of educating everyone of true inclusion. The other area we need to look through is some of the assumptions we make about who's a leader. What does a leader act like? What does a leader look like? What does a leader sound like? I think that Michelle Harrison with Cantor has done amazing breakthrough work through the Reykjavik Index, which really looks at what are some of the hidden assumptions of men in leadership and women in leadership. And I was really taken by a few of the comments. Rania brought this up, Julianne Morris, about results. And we need to look at results and where we go with that. I think it's important to look at the results rather than how you necessarily get to that result. And to give you one example, I remember much earlier in my career, I was preparing for a very difficult negotiation. And a very well-meaning senior executive came to me and he gave me his tips on how I was going to nail this negotiation. And it involved walking aggressively into the room, laying down the law, preferably using a few very choice words that he thought were going to help the situation. And then whatever I did, and he told me this twice, not to be too nice. Now, I heard him out and kind of nodded, and then I said, that was in no way how I intended to handle the situation. And he looked crestfallen. But then I asked him, when was the last time he sent me into a negotiation or a meeting or any situation and I didn't get him the results he wanted? And he was stumped. And the point was, by what he described would work beautifully for him. But if I had marched into that room, smacked the table and started cursing, the only thing that would have happened is everyone would have burst into laughter. I would have looked and I would have felt ridiculous. But by relying on my own skills, my own talents, I knew I could navigate the situation, and I did successfully. So we need to look at what are the different ways of getting to a result, and what are the different ways of succeeding, and what are the different ways of being a leader. And once we've done that, that's when we've had a real breakthrough in diversity in the workplace.
Thank you, Amy, for sharing that. That's hugely impressive and encouraging. For just looking at the screen here, we have five amazing speakers, 6 women here. We all look different. We all do things differently. And there's no one way. And thank you for describing this so wonderfully. But let me just kind of put my finger back into the sort of Salesforce saying we pay women and men the same kind of salary, the same amount. And that's I mean, you would think, yeah, sure. Once you establish that, you go ahead. But every year you need to sort of catch up with that. And why do you do it?
So this took place 4 or 5 years ago. We had 2 women from the executive team who went to our CEO and said that there might be an issue here. And I think he kind of shook his head for a few weeks. You know, we're a very progressive company. We're very proud of our values and the culture. And I truly don't think he thought there could be a problem. So Mark Benioff, our CEO, gave an interview about 3 weeks later, and this has clearly been on his mind. And he told the reporter that we were going to do a pay analysis. Whatever the results were, we were going to make them public, and we were going to pay the difference. Now, I have to say, as general counsel, that terrified me because we had no idea what we were going to find. Well, sure enough, we did the study. And at the end of it, we realized we were going to have to pay out $3 million that year to make up differences. But we also realized it can't be one and done. You can't solve this one time. You have to continue looking at this. So we committed to doing this every single year. Well, the next year we redid the study, and to our surprise and embarrassment, we had to pay out another $3 million. Now, part of that is we've acquired a number of companies, and when you acquire a company, you acquire their pay practices. But we've redone this survey every year. Every year we've had to make adjustments. This is not quite as easy as it sounds. You have to figure out whether the differences are happening at the hiring time, at the promotion time, at the annual review time, and we keep doing this. And again, you know, we paid out more than $10 million to do this, but we're continuing to do it every year. We're committed to it, and eventually we're going to have 1 year where we don't have to pay a dime, and that will be a time to celebrate.
Well, thanks, Amy. In one sentence, why do you do that?
Why wouldn't we?
Well,
It is absolutely. In fact, you know what? I want to be really careful on a number of things. On explaining why we do this, it isn't for liability. It isn't for other reasons. It's because it's right. And I also get very nervous when we talk a lot about having more women in business, maybe, or politics, or other areas, is good for business or good for politics. We don't need to justify our presence. Women are half of the world, and we belong in all of these places.
thank you, Amy.
I
Thank you so much.
agree with you more on that. I mean, we say at MasterCard it's just the decent thing to do. And we did exactly the same exercise and have to do it everywhere in the world to make sure that it's absolute parity for men and women in the same jobs. And we also publish our gender pay gap, and our gender pay gap was 0.92 cents to the dollar, so 8% on a global basis. And that exists because there are more senior men than there are senior in the company. I think that those two things are very different, but it's important to actually measure both and do something about both. I love the point, by the way, that was made at the beginning by Julianne about their clients. You know, your clients can influence what you're doing, and if they ask for, say, a mixed deal team or mixed support team of lawyers or whatever. And I think that in Amy and my world, we deal with a lot of buyers around the world. So we can do things like, say, you know, we want to have women-led companies in our supply chain, and we want to make sure that the companies that we're buying off actually have a very fair gender practices and things like this. So you can influence all the world around you, not just your company.
With our suppliers as well. So we also have suppliers and kind of ask them to fulfill certain criteria. It starts with human rights, for example. But I wanted to make another point, Amy, on your point of kind of your way of negotiating successfully. I think there are two elements to it. One is kind of you need to be courageous to do it your way and not the way others do it, or kind of it is done by the male world, if you so want. So courage really is something that people just need to do. And what this is very personal, if you so want, but what we as a company can do, or as a business kind of world can do, is kind of create a culture that enables women to be courageous, so kind of to speak up and to kind of do it their way. So have a culture that is inclusive and kind of helps them in their way, which is not easy, but kind of if your boss would have said you either do it my way or you don't do it, you wouldn't be here today maybe, but he was kind of open enough and open-minded enough to let you do it your way, and then kind of you were successful, obviously.
I'd love to pick up another point that Maris made about technology. And, you know, we've both come from big tech companies, and Maris was talking about the importance of technology and maybe the lack of women that are involved in that. And, you know, there are so many jobs in a technology company these days. Not everybody in computer programming. I mean, and I certainly don't do any programming as the vice chair of MasterCard, though I admit I was a little bit of a geek when I was younger and I could program. But the thing is, I think it's really educating young girls, probably around the age between 8 and 12, certainly before they drop those science subjects at school, to say, look, you know, technology is a great thing. You should get engaged with it. You know, keep up your science subjects. And there's a lot of fun areas. We actually have spoken to 1 million girls in this way. We have a program, Girls for Tech, and we bring from different schools and we show them all the cool things we do every day. And now we've got a new target of 5 million. I think companies can work in this way. And obviously, I see Rania's on there, sort of help out governments. Governments should have programs that think about educating girls in this way as well. I'm sure they do around the world, but we can all work together to achieve this.
Thanks, Anne. And Rania, if I can hand this over to you in addition with a question that was here in the chat from the attendees saying that not all jobs are desk jobs, office jobs, and in this area of tourism or of international cooperation, a lot of jobs are actually not necessarily possible to do in remote working. So maybe you can include that in your answer as well, thoughts on that.
Yeah, just on programs and education. I mean, in our case, we have 75% literacy for women. That is, how do you take that and then push it into jobs, equal pay, leadership roles? So getting the education is one issue, and there are programs for that, and there has been a very important documented progress on the topic. But then I think the discussion we're talking about is how do you go from take an educated, competent woman in this case and see how they can land on the correct job. With tourism, when I was a minister, the objective I put for the ministry and the vision was that we have at least one individual from each Egyptian household working in tourism. And here it wasn't man or woman, it was just an individual. There are so many jobs. When we talk about jobs for women, they're not all jobs. I was just in Luxor over the weekend, and we have community schools where teachers are in very remote areas and making sure that girls are able to come to school despite cultural norms and so forth. We have loans for women, which are in-kind loans for very small loans, but this helps sustain income for families in Upper Egypt. So there are very important successful stories of inclusion, regardless of which type of, if it's a desk job, in-field job. But the idea is to have engagement with the private sector, to make sure that the policies are well designed and spoken of. For instance, just last week, because the education during the education year, schools will only be working functionally for 2 days or 3 days. So the president had mentioned that we want to see how we can make sure that women get full payment during the days that the kids are at school, so that the remote work now is something that COVID made us all recognize, as was mentioned by Maurice and others. But how do you put effectively this in legislation and make it applicable both to the government sector and to the private sector? So I think that there is a silver lining in COVID, technology for sure, making sure that women are equipped with that extra skill that has proven to be very handy and productive. And second, that the new normal, which all of us are facing just now during this webinar, everyone in a different place, but we're together, can be used to also create more inclusion, since you don't have to physically be in a place. And of course, the unpaid labor, the unpaid work of women at home, giving help has been, again, a very, very important reason why the socioeconomic implications of COVID have been less than otherwise. And everybody recognizes that, both men and women.
Maurice, if I can bring you in, also adding a question again from the chat, which was quite fun to read, about if maybe the homeworking that we are now all more and more used to is also a way to level up the field, and that men need to stop pretending that they're working 80 hours per week and have no time for doing the work at home. So what's the experience in Estonia, where you're doing this kind of remote homeworking for much longer already, not only the past month?
Yes, we are working from home from March. So currently not usually sort of voluntary basis quite often. But one clear thing is that if you start to discuss with a woman, and being in a parliament, I got a lot of phone calls and emails asking and complaining women that they have a very big workload to work with the children, to make food and so on, and then to make their own work as well. At first it seemed too much, but I understand that also work to do, not working only. And I think this will actually improve the relations inside, arrive the younger generation to that the women are the same as the men. So if look on the younger people, they understand and they share the parental leave, they share the workload at home and so on. But anyway, with what we had, Anne said before that we have to attract girls, but we also had to attract into technology younger women and older women as well. We had, I think it was in last year, a special program for women who already had some kind of university degree, to teach them additional knowledge about IT, because we had IT personnel short. And it was very, very popular. And it meant that IT companies, suddenly, many of them understood that you can look for a woman who previously maybe have not learned technology. So widening the knowledge understanding. And yes, technology is not only programming, technology also designing the products. And this is very important because the customers are not only men, customers are also women. So you have to take this also into account, not talking about any other areas. And I think this is one area which what we have in Estonia learned a lot. If you are making some kind of program for example, we have a lot of public sector services in computers. And if you are not taking account all those customers and a lot of women among them, then you fail. So you have to take account everyone's needs or a different kind of needs. And you have to include into your team all different kind of groups. It's just necessary to be successful.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mary, for sharing that with us. Before I wrap up, I'd like to just ask a question to Amy. You all have been asked this question so many times, and you're all going to roll your eyes because everybody, every woman who gets into leadership will be asked at least once on that path, if not every week, at least once. How do you actually balance your work and life responsibilities? Now, male leaders hardly ever get this question, so there is a huge proportion of sexism towards men because they're assumed to not play any role in families, apparently. Amy, just kind of really super sharp, super short, how can we change that narrative and address those biases that both women and men are confronted with?
First, one of the phrases I hope I never hear again from anyone is, sorry, I'm unmuted now. All right, great. One of the phrases I hope I never hear again from anyone is, I don't know how you do it. Or, you know, how are you balancing everything? There's such an assumption in there that you might not really be doing it right and you can't do it. We need to move past that. If you start to ask someone that question, check yourself first and ask yourself, would you be asking that to a man in the same situation? The answer is generally no. And on the perceptions, I do want to say that one of the areas where I find that women can be held back is by the perception that kindness or politeness is the same as weakness. And what we need to do is make sure that kindness and politeness are things that we are encouraging in the workplace every single day, and that is a form of strength, it's a form of power, and it's what we want to see in our leaders.
Thank you, Amy. It feels like you did all the wrapping up in such a perfect way that I can't really add to it. Let me still try by thanking all of you for your insight statements and stories. It was really hugely inspiring and insightful. I took away just 4 key messages. I'm sure there are many, many more. So let me start by just a bold call to all the attendees. A lot of you here are from businesses or also from government. You all have suppliers, and there were some examples of, yes, put this demand of high diversity of a certain percentage of women in those as a prerequisite to give the contract to somebody that you want supplied to you, could be a very powerful instrument to change things. The other one was that we heard very concrete examples like Salesforce and MasterCard closing the gender pay gap and willing to walk the talk and putting money into that. Also the ambitious parental care, parental leave scheme that Ann Cairns was referencing to, that you have in MasterCard, which will hopefully have spillover effect again to other businesses and also to governments to help with legislation and policies, so that it's not a responsibility that single businesses have to take, but that it really becomes a standard that fathers and mothers are treated the same in terms of parental leave. Then we heard a lot about technology, how this can level up the field, how this can be really an eye-opener for work share. This can also be an eye-opener for an educational tool for girls and boys alike, but ensuring that we have equal access and equal opportunities to these remains key. And then just finally, if the point of view or the advice that Amy gave, if we just would reverse the situation, reverse the question, would be something that we say about a woman, would we say it the same way about a man? Would be a question that's put to a woman, would that be put to a man? And if we make this exercise in our own head, maybe we can start by changing already our inbuilt, maybe sometimes not so conscious biases, or that we hope that we don't have, and that we can make it faster, the change of stereotypes and values. So thank you very much, all of you. It was great having you, and we'll be cut off, I think, in 1 minute, so we can be faster than that, and just say goodbye to everybody attending and thanking you for your interest.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Silvana.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.